In ancient Egypt, your entire eternal fate was decided by a single physical measurement. Your heart was weighed against a feather. If it was heavier, burdened by deceit or violence, it was fed to the devourer, Amit. The consequence was not torment, but total final erasure from existence. This is the terrifying zero-sum math that an entire civilization was built upon. To understand why, we must start with the real function of the god, often reduced to a cartoon, Anubis, the guide to the scales. The dusk light in this room is the color of old paper, and it catches the dust motes drifting above my desk like stars in a slow, silent galaxy. In my hand is this, a plastic figurine of Anubis, bought from a museum gift shop. It's cartoonish, almost friendly, with big eyes and a clean, sleek silhouette. It's a souvenir. And holding it feels like holding a tiny, cheap Eiffel Tower that tells you absolutely nothing about Paris, about the smell of rain on cobblestones, or the weight of centuries in the ironwork. For the last 3 weeks, I have been living with the texts. Facsimiles of papyri, translations of pyramid inscriptions, academic commentaries that cross-reference spells across dynasties, and the entity that emerges from those pages is nothing like this plastic thing. The modern pop culture version is a mascot. The ancient Egyptian reality was a function, a critical, terrifying, and meticulously defined function in the machinery of the cosmos. The Egyptians built their entire civilization around a single, unavoidable moment that came after death. It wasn't about prayers or piety in an abstract sense. It was about preparation for a literal, procedural event, and at the center of that event was Anubis. Not a monster, not a pet, a psychopomp, a guide, but also an executor. His role was specific and unyielding: to usher your soul into the hall of two truths, to place your heart upon a golden scale, and to measure its weight against the feather of Ma'at, the principle of cosmic order. Your entire life, every action, every thought, distilled into a single physical weight. And here's the part that modern retellings often soften: there was no mercy in this math. If your heart was heavier than the feather, if it was burdened with deceit, greed, or violence, it was fed to a waiting creature named Amit. The consequence was total, final annihilation. No afterlife, no second chance, just cessation. I set the figurine aside on the desk. Its shadow stretches long and thin, a distorted version of itself. The disconnect between this toy and the texts is so vast, it feels like a kind of silence. So let's leave the souvenir in the dusk. Let me open this facsimile of the Book of the Dead to the specific spells and illustrations that define the moment of judgment. Not a story, but a procedure. Let's look at the Papyrus of Ani, a specific scroll from around 1250 BCE. Here, in spell 125, the text is not poetic, it is precise. The hieroglyphs do not call him a jackal god. That's our term, clumsy and vague. They name him Anubis, foremost of the divine booth, Kentiamentu, foremost of the Westerners. These are titles of office. He is the chief official of the Hall of Judgment. The illustration shows him not in a dramatic pose, but performing a function. He adjusts the plumb line of the scale itself, ensuring its absolute balance. His posture is that of a technician, a weigher of precious metals. The fate of an eternal soul is treated with the cold precision of a legal contract or a surgical procedure, a process with no margin for error. And the deceased Ani does not speak to a myth. He recites a script, a 42-part negative confession. I have not stolen. I have not caused pain. I have not made anyone weep. Each statement is a counterweight, meant to physically lighten the heart in the opposite pan. The feather of Ma'at is not a symbol. It is the standard weight, the ultimate unit of measure. You read this, and the entire civilization snaps into a different focus. This was not mythology for entertainment. It was a technical manual for the most important journey a person would ever take. Every moral lesson, every social law was a form of training for this single measurable event. Your life was a preparation of the heart, for the moment it would be placed on that gold plate, and the silence of the hall would be broken only by the slight click of the scale finding its equilibrium. I close the facsimile. The lamplight now feels too bright, too modern. The procedure is complete in the text, but the weight of its implication lingers here in the room. They built pyramids to navigate this. They composed entire books to prepare for it, and at the center of it all was a functionary, a divine executor whose judgment was as procedural and irreversible as gravity. The plastic figurine on my desk doesn't cast a shadow anymore. The room has grown too dark for that. It just sits there, a silent, simplified echo of a mechanism that once measured the worth of a soul. That hall, the Hall of Two Truths, is not what you imagine. It is not a grand throne room. The papyrus of Ani shows it as an austere, silent chamber of black and white stone, lit by a cold, dawn-like light that has no visible source. The air is still. There is no audience, no jury, only the necessary instruments. On the left, the scale, a simple, elegant balance of gold and obsidian. On the right, a single ostrich feather resting on a stand of pure alabaster. That is Mat, truth, order, cosmic balance, reduced to a physical object you could hold in your hand, and between them two figures, not standing in judgment, but waiting at their posts. Anubis is not looking at the deceased. He is looking at the scale. His hand is on the central pillar, his fingers checking the alignment. His role is not to decide, it is to ensure the mechanism is flawless. The measurement must be perfect. His black form is a silhouette against the pale stone, all sharp angles and focused intent. And beside him, seated, is the reason for the silence. Amit. The texts describe a composite creature. The forequarters of a lion, the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, the head of a crocodile, but the illustration renders her with a dreadful, patient stillness. She is not snarling, she is waiting. Her crocodile jaw rests on her paws, her single eye fixed on the empty gold plate opposite the feather. She is not a demon, she is a function, a divine disposal. If the heart is heavier than the feather, her purpose is to consume it, not as punishment, but as a clinical removal of a flawed component. The soul ceases to exist. No second chance, no appeal. The entire complex journey of a life ends here, in this sterile room, with a simple imbalance of weight. Think of that silence. The deceased has recited their 42 denials. Their heart, believed to be the seat of conscience and memory, has been placed upon the plate by Horus or Thoth. Anubis adjusts the counterweight, and then nothing. No speech, no deliberation. Just the slow, inevitable settling of the scale. It is the silent, sterile tension of waiting for a single medical test result that will define everything. No excuses, just the number on the scale. Your entire moral existence quantified. Did your kindness outweigh your cruelty? Did your honesty outweigh your deceit? The feather does not measure deeds, it measures the heart they created. A heart scarred by greed is denser. A heart hardened by malice is heavier. The scale feels it all. And in that moment, the civilization's obsession makes a terrible, logical sense. Every law, every social more, every religious injunction was a weight management program for the soul. Do this, avoid that, not for a God's favor, but to keep your spiritual density below a critical threshold, to pass through a gate where the only key was the lightness of your own being. The illustration shows the ideal outcome, the two plates in perfect equilibrium. Anubis, satisfied, announces the result to Osiris. But you cannot look at that perfect balance without seeing the other possibility, hovering just outside the frame. The slight dip of the heart's plate, the quiet shift in Amit's posture, the end that is not an ending, but an erasure. They built for eternity because they believed they could qualify for it. But the qualifying exam was administered in a room of unbearable simplicity by a functionary who did not even meet your gaze against a standard as light as a breath, and waiting beside him, a creature whose only purpose was to ensure that failure was absolute. And then, the scale tips. It is not a dramatic lurch. In the illustrations, it is a slight, definitive dip of the heart's plate, a millimeter of descent. The gold dish sinks, the feather rises, untouched, into that sourceless light. There is no sound, no gasp. The hieroglyphic text accompanying the scene is equally sterile. It is found to be heavy. It is not granted to him. Anubis does not look at the deceased. His gaze remains locked on the imbalance, his hand still on the central pillar, confirming the measurement. His work is complete. He is the quality control inspector who has just logged a critical failure. There is no malice in his posture, only procedural finality. And Amit moves. Her patient stillness evaporates. The composite creature lion, hippo, crocodile unfolds in one fluid motion. There is no roar, no theatrical pounce. It is a function being executed. Her crocodile jaws open, not in a snarl, but in a precise, wide arc. She does not leap at the deceased. She consumes the heart on the plate. The texts are clear. The heart is eaten, devoured, made to cease. The soul, its anchor destroyed, unravels. It does not go to a place of punishment. It does not suffer. It simply ends. The complex tapestry of memory, love, regret, and identity unwoven in an instant. This is the core horror of the system, its brutal fairness. No pleading, no divine mercy. The feather was the absolute standard, and you either met it or you were unmade. It is the finality of a failed safety inspection that results in immediate, irreversible shutdown, not a fine, but termination. Consider the quiet of the hall afterward, the scale empty on one side, the feather back on its stand. Amit returned to her seated vigil, her maw closed, Anubis already turning his attention to the next soul in the endless line. The chamber is spotless. No evidence remains. This is why the 42 denials mattered, not as a magical incantation, but as the ultimate self-audit. You stood in that silence and catalogued your own density. I have not caused pain. I have not stolen. I have not lied. Each statement was a weight you hoped you had shed. The entire civilization was an attempt to build lighter hearts, but in that silent room with the Devourer waiting, they acknowledged the terrifying possibility that you could do everything right and still be heavy. That the heart could be weighed down by things you never even named. So how do you live, knowing that every action adds a grain of sand to that final, fatal weight? You live with intention. Every day becomes an act of spiritual accounting. Picture an Egyptian farmer at midday, the sun a white hammer on the baked earth. He is not merely tilling soil for bread. With each careful row he plants, he is consciously performing a deed of ma'at, an act of truth and harmony. He is not just feeding his family, he is lightening his heart. When he divides the water from the shared irrigation channel fairly with his neighbor, he is making a deposit. When he speaks honestly at the market, refuses a petty theft, shows kindness to a weary animal. Each choice is a subtraction from the ultimate burden. His entire life is a meticulous effort to keep his soul buoyant. This is the life lived in the shadow of the scale. It is the modern anxiety of building a permanent record or a credit score, but for him it was literal existential survival. There were no casual sins. A lie wasn't just wrong, it was dense. A moment of greed wasn't just shameful, it was ballast for your own annihilation. Every interaction, from the grand offering at a temple to the quiet patience with a child, was a direct contribution to your metaphysical mass. You were your own lifelong auditor, building the evidence you would one day present in that silent black and white room. The civilization itself was a machine designed to produce lighter hearts. But the true dread, the quiet thought that must have haunted them in the dark, was the realization that you could do everything right, follow every rule, and still discover, in that final moment, a heaviness you never knew you carried. And so, They wrote cheat codes. In the quiet of a tomb at night, by lamplight they painted spells from the Book of the Dead onto the walls. These were not magic. They were carefully written instructions, whispered to your own heart, to remind it how to be light when the time came. Do not let my heart be heavy. One pleads. I have given bread to the hungry, water to the thirsty. It is the profound vulnerability of the system laid bare. Even with a moral life, you needed a guidebook to navigate the bureaucracy of death. It is like studying frantically for a pass-fail exam where you can bring your notes, but the notes are prayers and your heart is the test booklet. The ultimate fear was forgetting the right words.